Welcome back to the workshop. As you can see, I have the HOLMSIDE back on the trolley. Now it's been a couple of weeks since I've touched it, which is why it's been a little while since there's been a video out. But the reason for that has been there's been so much going on around the house and in the garden and so forth that I just haven't had time to work on it. I've just got back from the Eccleswood standard gauge rally. I didn't take much video, but I'm going to take a look to see if I took enough to put a little video together of what happened. But I had good fun, and it's given me the motivation to get George's engine back together and sorted for him. So where were we? The next job was to try and put the balance or springing to hold the valves onto the seat of the cylinders. For that, the first thing is to try and get the valves out. If you come a bit closer, I'll show you where my thought process is and what I'm hoping to do, and see if I can make it work. Let's take a look. Now, hopefully you can see well enough in there. If I take the cover off, obviously the valve is inside here, and in order to take the valve off the guide rod and get it out, the valve rod has to be removed. I am hoping that when I release the grub screw from the valve drive block, the drive block should move up and down the valve spindle. However, I need to get it right off the end of the spindle. I am hoping that if I disconnect the end of the rod, I'm certain this block won't pass the horn block, but I think if I unscrew it, the valve might pass the horn block and axle box. If it doesn't, then I start needing to think about taking the valve chest off, which I don't really want to do, because if I take the valve chest off, then I need to clean up gasket faces and all sorts, which I've still got to do here, but at least it's easier to get to here. So we'll see. So the nut is off the end. I can't do this well with you seeing, but the pin's out. Not a bad looking pin. I need to see how good a fit it is, but that gets this kind of out the way. I wonder if oh, that block comes undone quite easily. I was expecting that to be a bit tighter, to be fair, but that's not bad. So far, so good. That out the way. Also need to slacken the grub screw. But even if it doesn't pass completely, it might be enough just to get it off the end of the spindle. But yes, I'll find the Allen keys and we'll be back once again. So we're back, hopefully with a slightly better angle for you. I found the right Allen key, I think. As it happens, my tin of Allen keys was right next to me anyway. It just had a rag on top of it. There we go. Not easy to work in there without blocking your view. But that is slack. And it's not moving, so maybe no, it doesn't feel like it. I thought there might have been a second grub screw in there. this is just going to need a bit of work to get it out. I'll figure this out and I'll let you know how I've done it. So I've put the buckle back on the end of the rod and put some packers in between the valve and the end of the block, a bit of brass bar and a hammer, and just tap it out. Obviously it started moving quite easily now, but that was how I got it going. And now if I take the buckle off the end, hopefully, so the valve hasn't come all the way out, but has it come out enough that I can get it off the end of the spindle? No, it hasn't. That is a nuisance. And it's suddenly gone solid, so probably because that's, there we go. So I'm going to need to think about this. So, as I'd like to say suspected, but I'll probably say hoped, because I suspected it to not work, because that's just sod's law. I've taken the keep bolts out the keeps. Obviously the axle's dropped enough, and let's see if this comes back far enough now. So looks so close. I think there's some damage on this. Yeah, there's some damage. That's where the grub screw's been tightened down on the spindle. It's stopping the valve rod passing through the gland. So that's not good. I'll have a think and I'll be back. So my first try was a little file, find the dimples, just give them a little rub to try and get rid of the high spots, and it seems to have worked. Certainly gone further. Well, there's the valve block, the drive block rather. And the valve block. Wow, that's big. Excellent. Let's see what we can do with that then. So just a little note about these valves. So slide valves, pocket underneath, which allows the exhaust steam back out the passage into the exhaust. I would have thought in an ideal world that would have been bigger. Unfortunately, because of the height of the drive block and the depth of this slot, it can't be. I mean, you could argue that since that seems to be too deep, because the drive block is sitting, it's lifting off the seat onto the drive block, it could have all been a little bit thicker. I mean, it doesn't need to be, but as you can see, this face is quite rusty, but this face is lovely. So that is the lower face, which has been sitting in an oil, like oil's been put down the blast pipe at the end of the day, which has kept it all nice and oily. And the top has probably been not quite so oily, and it gets rusty. So unfortunately, that's just something you have to live with this type of cylinder. So before I go too far, I just assembled it back up again with the valve block the other way up, and there is hardly any movement of the valve coming off the seat. makes you wonder if it got built the right way round. I'll show you what made me think about that. When I remove the valve, the hole is not in the middle. Now, if I did just drill a hole the other side, it would be not a particularly deep hole, so there wouldn't be many threads in the grub screw. So I don't really want to do that. So it's going to be some sort of spring pushing this against the seat, the valve. So at this stage the question is, what am I going to do to push this away onto the seat? It needs to sit like that effectively. One option that I know somebody has done is a piece of bronze sitting on top here, bolted into the top of the valve, and then it pushes against the cover, so as it runs it's always pushed against the seat. That has worked perfectly well for somebody else. Personally, I'm not so keen, because you're relying on a piece of spring rubbing on that all the time, which will work fine for a while, but at some point that could, I'm not saying it will, but it could wear through, break, and then you've got bits of something inside. Personally, I would rather put something in that gap or in that gap. My first thought originally was to, within the thickness of that face, drill down into the top here, and then both ends, put a little spring and plunger in each of them, or just a little spring, and that would push against the valve spindle. However, I think I'm going to do the opposite and drill into this, couple of springs, maybe plungers, that just sit in there, and it will hold the valve off the seat. I'll make it stainless steel springs so that they push out, so they can compress completely, but they'll push out and hold it off far enough that it just pushes a little bit of pressure on, but not too much, just enough to hold it on the seat when it's when there's no steam. So let's get to that. So I managed to find some springs. They're quite soft springs, and as you can see, I have drilled into the face side of the drive block, and they can sit in, they can completely compress, and they are strong enough to hold the weight of the valve. So that can all go back together now, and then we can think about timing. But I'll just put it onto the spindle, get the drive block on the end, and put it back together. But I won't do up the grub screw yet, because we will talk about how to set the position of the valve. So I'll put this back together, I'll get the other side done, and we can come back and set the timing. So one last thing before I go on to setting the valves. I've got all the valves back together, they're ready to be set, but I wanted to talk to you about A, what's happening, and B, another suggestion that was given to me on YouTube. Thank you so much for all the suggestions. I did consider them all, and I decided this was the favoured solution for me. But balanced slide valves were talked about. Now this is a very rough drawing of the cylinder. I should put the lid on steam chest. So the steam is put into a passage here, fills this chamber with steam, and as the valve moves forward and back, at the moment it would be putting steam into this end of the cylinder, and as it reaches the other end, the valve moves the other way and steam goes back down this way. As you can see, the steam goes into this end, and the redundant steam at this end of the cylinder is pushed back up under the valve and out through the exhaust passage there. Now, a balance slide valve would have another piece on the top of the valve, whether it was a sliding piece or what is up for design work and to make it the best work. One I've seen was a circular, I think it was a circular piece, so it dropped down inside. It was a flat top valve, so the valve spindle screwed in, it disappeared down inside, and then there was an O-ring in this space, so the O-ring gave it a little bit of flexibility and just pushed the top onto the steam chest cover. That works great. So what it does is it reduces the amount of pressure on the valve onto the seat, because the steam pressure in this cavity is acting on all of the available surface area of valve. So if you take away all of this surface area, you've drastically reduced the amount of steam pushing the valve onto the seat. I did consider it. It takes a bit of planning. If I had the cylinders off, I might have considered it, but also this isn't my engine. It's not a full rebuild. It would just tidy up a couple of bits, and as I was taking the covers off to check the valve timing, I thought I would sort this out because it was quite bad on this particular engine. But I don't want to do a complete redesign and a complete rebuild of the engine. So keeping it in situ, I felt like, and especially with this design of valve with the crossbar and the valve spindle passing right through and a crossbar across, it didn't seem particularly easy to do this. But something else I did think of was where the valve is. Looks like that from the side with the crossbar. I'll put a spring in there. But something I did consider was to drill in to these, drill in, make a plunger that went in with the spring underneath. That would have had a similar effect to what I've done, but it would have been rubbing against the steam chest cover again. And I wanted to reduce anything that rubs and wears. So doing the way I did with the little spring under here, it's a static spring just pushing. It's the two parts aren't moving against each other. So the same reason I didn't do the piece of spring steel that had been suggested to me. So it had been suggested drill and tap in one end, put a bolt and a piece of spring bronze, I think it was suggested. So that piece of bronze pushed against the cover. Again, I didn't really want something that rubs because it can wear out. So that's why I've gone the way I've gone. Now let's get back onto the timing. So with the timing, you want to start admitting steam as the piston reaches the end of the stroke. So what I'm going to do is put it in forward gear, roll the engine forward, and hopefully as the piston reaches front centres, the front port should be just starting to open. And as it reaches rear centres, it should be just starting to open. But what's most important at this stage, because we don't know if the eccentrics are set right, the movement from one end to the other should be equal. So at each end of the stroke of the valve, there should be an equal gap between the valve and the end of the cover, or an equal opening of port. So I'm going to do that. I don't think it's going to be easy for you to see what I'm doing, but that's my first stage. Centralise the valve and just tweak it slightly onto the spindle, tighten it, just nip it up, and hopefully it won't move, and then I'll tighten it fully when we've proved everything is correct. So I've got the valve in the balanced position, so it's got equal throw fore and aft, and I think I'm pretty much spot on in forward on the left hand side and reverse on the right hand side. In actual fact, it does just seem to be slightly off in the other gear. So when I put the valve in, eyeballed it in the middle, I then put it in forward on the right hand side, or I did the left hand side first, and it got balanced pretty much spot on. The timing was pretty much bang on for forward. When I put it into reverse, it had equal opening on centres, or rather when it opened, it was an equal amount just either before or after, I forget now, before or after centre at both ends of the stroke. So it was in the right place, it's just that the eccentric's in the wrong place, so it's doing it too, so it was too early at both ends. If it had been too early at one and too late at the other, then I'd move the valve. On the other side, it was the opposite. So in reverse, it's bang on. In forward, it just needs tweaking. So that might just be the fact that I'd swapped those two eccentrics over. I don't know if they were correct in the first place, because one seems to be a little bit more off than the other. Whereas you'd expect if one had gone exaggerating, but 5 degrees forward, the other one would have to go 5 degrees back. But in fact, one's probably half the amount that the other one's got to move. So the next thing is to find the grub screw in the eccentric, slacken that, and just tweak it to get the best opening of the valve. I'll be back. That might have to be done up on end, because I think the eccentrics had a hole in them to be able to put a grub screw through, put an Allen key through to slack the grub screw. But I think that was on the bottom. So with the engine up on end, I don't know if you can see from there, there are holes in the eccentrics. So I knew that this side, in forward gear, the events were happening slightly too late. So I then rotated they're slightly early, I forget now. I rotated the wheels until I could see through the hole in the eccentric rather than the strap. Put the Allen key through, hoping it was the right size, because this was the same size Allen key I used on the valves, and it was the right size. So I was able to slacken the Allen key, grub screw, and I slackened it off, turned the wheels ever so slightly, which moved the eccentric because the Allen key was still in the hole, so the eccentric moved with the eccentric strap. Turned the wheel slightly, just nipped it, took it out, tried it, and it took a couple of tiny little tweaks until it seems to be bang on. Now I can turn my attention to the other side, but there's a problem. The other side is that manufactured brass plate strap that we talked about in the previous episode, and there's no hole in it to adjust the eccentric. So I'm going to have to take the whole back half of the strap off and just work on timing the engine by pulling the front of the strap onto it. And I suppose I could actually what I might do is just put a flat on that strap so I could drill a hole through it. I'll have a think, but that means taking that strap off. So what I'll probably do is just, once I've taken the back half of the strap off, just hold the eccentric against the, hold the strap against the eccentric whilst I tweak the eccentric. Then I can put it back together and hope that it's all good. So I'll get that done and then we'll be back to see how it is. So all that's left to get those cylinders sorted now is to knock up some gaskets. Gaskets for the covers, bolt it all back together, steam pipes in, exhaust pipes in, and we're done. But I am going to call it a day there and do all that next time. There's a few other little odds and sods to tidy up that I want to look at for now. And then I've got something else to look at on the lubricator. So hopefully I'll see you next time. Please do come back. Please do like, share, subscribe, and let me know what you liked, what you don't like. Hit the like if you liked what I've done, and just let me know what's going on. So thanks very much. I'll see you soon.